Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right. Welcome to our webinar on how to develop your cage-free egg roadmap that meets your commitment on time and helps you reduce costs in Asia. My name is Elissa Lane, and I am the CEO of Global Food Partners. And we are really happy to have you here today. My colleague, Don Neo, is going to be presenting various case studies from our work in Asia on developing roadmaps. And Dawn is our senior manager for corporate engagement. And she has been working for years with companies across Asia to develop their plans for implementing their cage-free egg policies. She will share a bit more about her experience and about herself. But Dawn is the expert in roadmap development. She's worked on all different types of implementation strategies and plans for companies. So I'm really excited that she will be able to share her knowledge and her experiences with you all. I'll hand it over to Dawn in just a few seconds, but please do leave your questions in the Q&A below. You can leave your questions at any point in the webinar, and after Dawn's presentation, we will do Q&A and try to get to all of your questions. Anyway, welcome again. This is a topic that we really love. We really enjoy developing plans that are actionable, that are doable, and that really work for companies in different markets in Asia. So I hope you find this webinar very useful, and I will hand it over to Dawn.
Thank you, Elissa. Thank you for the introduction, and welcome to this session, everybody. I'll just quickly share my screen. Let me know if you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Okay, great. So as Elissa said, my name is Dawn Neo, and I'm the Senior Manager for Corporate Engagement with Global Food Partners. And today we have guests joining us from Europe. Good morning. Guests from Asia, good afternoon. The topic for focusing on today is how to develop cage-free commitments, cage-free roadmaps in Asia that meet your commitments on time and reduce cost. Give me a second, I'm having difficulty advancing the slides. Did the slide move to slide 2, Elissa?
Yes.
Great. So this session is really for food and hospitality companies that want to rank well in animal welfare benchmarks in Asia as well as globally. They want to save time and get started in implementing their cage-free commitments quickly. At the same time, they want to optimize the cost of cage-free eggs that they're paying for. Now, today we want to try something a little bit different from maybe what you have experienced before. I know that often when clients come to us, they have already tried different ways to implement their cage-free policies. And many of you have likely tried talking to your suppliers or asking for quotations or trying to find suppliers from lists provided by nonprofits. Or you have tried increasing your budget for cage-free eggs in some market by reducing spending on other items. Or you have tried implementing solutions that have worked for you in other parts of the world in Asia. Maybe you've tried to do it by yourself and ended up spending a bit of time and wasting time and trying to find solutions, but finding that the results were not as what you have expected. Today, what we're sharing here is different. I'll share with you how we have helped some companies get started to implement their policies quickly and address the challenges that they were facing by developing implementation roadmaps. Now, we've spoken with some of you, and we've spoken with over 50 companies on this topic, and we know that many of you are finding it very difficult to take the next step forward in Asia because there are real challenges in some of the markets here, such as an immature supply chain. There's a lack of stable supply of cage-free eggs in many markets here. And even in markets that already have cage-free, the prices can be up to 2 to 3 times higher than conventional eggs. And if you have operations in remote locations, some suppliers just cannot deliver there. In many cases, your colleagues and your suppliers don't really understand what cage-free is, and often, result in problems as well. So I'm very curious at this point, which of these challenges are the challenges that you are facing? Would you like to take part in the poll that's popping up on your screen now, or keying in information in the chat box below? Love to hear from you. Are you facing the challenges that I've shared earlier, or you're facing other challenges? Okay, Elisa, we can close the poll and get the results. So we can see that in many markets, many of you, 57% of you said there's a lack of supply, 71% of you said that high prices and various other issues that I have mentioned before. That's really, really helpful to know. And that coincides with what we had also heard from our clients. The good news is most of these challenges can be overcome. We have helped clients save time and implement their policies and optimize the cost of cage-free eggs through localized tailored roadmaps. And today I'll walk you through exactly how we have done that. First of all, I'll share with you what I have learned over the years. These challenges that you are facing are exactly the challenges that I have faced as well. When most of my friends were studying business or IT, I chose to study food technology, and I wanted to help develop healthy, innovative food products. Later on, while working with the industry, I discovered that there were all these issues in the food industry related to sustainability and animal welfare. And when I started working on this issue, this particular issue, cage-free eggs, years ago, I helped some of the first companies in Asia go cage-free, such as Lo and Behold, Privé Group in Singapore, Salad Stop, Tesco Lotus, now called Lotus Retail, Minor International. These are some of the first Asian companies that announced cage-free commitments. I also work with cage-free, we also work with producers and food and hospitality companies that already have cage-free commitments to implement their policies in Asia. So I had to deal with all these problems that you're facing right now. Cost is definitely a big factor for both companies and producers. We know that it does cost a bit more to produce cage-free eggs. The question is really how much more? There are many, many factors that I won't go into that can add to the price, but some of them can be mitigated. So in order to address these challenges that I've shared with you, I helped to develop and organize some of the first corporate roundtables on this issue in Asia, as well as industry workshops for producers. And we invited experts and producers from all over the world to share information with the corporates and producers in Asia. And even though the feedback was that these workshops were useful, we were not seeing significant transition in many, many markets. Some producers told me that after the workshops, they had to Google for information on how to go cage-free when they went back to the farm. Many of them went through trial and error, making costly mistakes, spending a lot of time on their own figuring out how to do this. On the other hand, food and hospitality companies that we work with were still saying that they couldn't find the supply that they needed that met their requirements. I knew that there had to be better ways to help the industry. And that's why my colleagues and I came together to create the cage-free tailored solutions method, because we saw that the way these challenges were being addressed in Asia was not working very well. And we saw that day in, day out, and we wanted to change it. And as the name implies, our method moves away from the one-size-fits-all approach, and the roadmaps that we develop with our clients solve the individualized challenges and realities that each of them is facing. And today, I'll share with you how we have helped our clients overcome these challenges. By the end of this session, I'll show you how you can meet your commitments on time and also optimize cost. Now, some of the common misconceptions that we hear over and over again include, number one, cage-free eggs are too costly. We've seen how companies found it hard to move forward to implement their policies because they believe that cage-free eggs are too costly in Asia. And when you believe that it is too costly, you may delay action, you may hold back from transitioning your supply chain, you may be reducing spending on other items to be able to afford cage-free eggs. But the truth is, cage-free eggs in many Asian markets can be cheaper. Let me give you an example of how we help one of our clients who used to believe exactly that cage-free eggs are too expensive. This is a major food service company that we have worked with. They came to us because they found that they were getting quotes for cage-free eggs that were 3 times higher than conventional eggs in Asia. It was way out of their budget, and they didn't know how to make progress on their cage-free commitment. Through our cage-free tailored solutions method, we discovered that one of the main issues that some of their potential suppliers actually lack technical knowledge, technical know-how on how to optimize production on farm. And we know that this topic is relatively new in Asia. Many producers are still learning how to manage new systems. And this usually translates to higher prices initially because they're making costly mistakes. And after interviewing, in this case, after interviewing a number of farmers, we finally found one producer that had the potential to expand to meet the client's requirements, but they needed technical support to do so successfully. We did a cost-benefit analysis and then entered through an impact partnership with the client and this producer, whom we'll call producer A. Then the client felt confident enough to sign a 3-year contract with producer A, with us providing technical support to optimize production and reduce cost. And I'll share some figures with you a little bit later. But at the same time, we also engage with the existing supplier that this client has, producer B. Producer B still produces regular conventional cage eggs. They don't have cage-free eggs, but they're interested. And through this whole process, we engaged with them and we connected them with our technical specialists for support. And we want to continue supporting them on this journey so that this client have more options. Now, what this means for this particular food service client was that they could then quickly get started in implementing the cage-free eggs. And up to this point, they had already saved $1 million a year compared to what they would have paid if they had believed that cage-free eggs was too costly and they had accepted the prices that they were being quoted. And this represents a 40% reduction in cost for them. Now, this producer is now also certified humane. So it adds to the solving the issues of certification and traceability. So let me pose you a very quick question now. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you feel if you can negotiate a contract, a more economical deal for cage-free eggs successfully? And you can also reduce costs in the eggs that you're buying. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like feeling the most happy, the most successful. Please feel free to put that number in the chat box from 1 to 10. And are you open to the idea that cage-free eggs in Asia can be cheaper? So moving on to the next common misconception that we have seen. Many companies believe that they have a lot of lists of suppliers that they get from nonprofits, and they can transition their egg supply chain based on those lists. One problem that we see is that these lists are often not updated regularly. So the information on this list can be outdated. When we audited some of these lists recently, we found that some suppliers were no longer in business. And newer producers who came online, who entered the market, were not included. many Asian countries such as Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Japan, there are cage-free producers, but they also happen to be free-range egg producers. And we know that free-range eggs cost a lot more to produce. So the prices that you're seeing for free-range eggs are not cage-free eggs. And a lot of these producers also tend to be quite small in scale. When we caught some of them up, we found that some of them produce 50 to 200 eggs a day. And I know that many of you will need more than 50 to 200 eggs a day for the scale of your operations. So these producers just will not do. When you get quotations from these suppliers on this list, the prices are not optimized. The lack of economies of scale, the fact that this is a new topic, they're still transitioning, still learning the system, just translates to higher cost. The majority of producers on this list are also not certified to good animal welfare standards. And I have seen a few businesses willing to pay a lot more for cage-free eggs, and they have started implementing the policies. But the truth is, for most of you on this call, when you need to buy large quantities with a limited budget, these lists are not a good solution for Asia. For example, when we worked with one of our clients in hospitality, when they came to us on advice to implement their cage-free policy, they have tried finding suppliers on lists, but they found that some of these suppliers are small-scale producers. Some of them have shops on Shopee, which is an online trading, online e-commerce platform like Amazon, and they're not able to supply them. And when we spoke to their suppliers, we found that most of these suppliers are distributors. They have never heard of cage-free. They don't understand what it's about. They think that cage-free is small-scale, backyard, free-range production from 50 years ago. And they have no idea how to access cage-free producers because they're distributors. They buy eggs from a spot market. So no wonder our client was frustrated, right? Through our cage-free tailored solutions method, we help them develop localized roadmaps and identify producers, primary producers in each market that can supply them and meet their requirements. And some of these producers are not on lists, like I mentioned before. We also recommended training for distributors, basic training so that they can at least understand what cage-free is about and get the right product. In this case, the client also wanted cage-free liquid eggs. As we know, there is no supply of cage-free liquid eggs in Asia. So in this case, we work with an egg processor to engage with the cage-free producers that we identified to bring on to create that supply for this particular client. And because the client is in the hospitality business, they had many properties in remote locations that the current distributors could not deliver to. So for these particular instances, for some properties, we recommend credit trading. And if you don't already know our impact incentives program, I can explain to you later on after the webinar or over a call. But as a result of this roadmap and the solutions that we propose, this client was able to quickly implement their policies in many of these markets and stop wasting time trying to call up suppliers on lists and running into roadblocks. And how would you feel if you can solve these issues as well and save time and easily get suppliers that meet your requirements in all these markets? If you could type between a scale of 1 to 10, type 1 to 10 in the chat box, that would be really useful to know as well, whether this is an important consideration for you. While you're doing that, I could quickly share the third misconception, that many companies think that the market for cage-free eggs will mature on its own. If they just wait a few more years, the supply will become available. And when you believe that, you may not set a timeline or a plan, and implementation gets put on the back burner. Your ranking on scores, on benchmarks, and progress initiatives will not improve. In fact, it may get progressively worse because the standards may be raised. Now, the truth is, the market for cage-free is nascent in Asia. It is still an emerging market many of these countries here. It is very different from the situation that you see in the EU or in North America, where the market is more mature. There's a lack of stable supply in many countries. We have seen similar challenges with other commodities, such as palm oil, cotton, cocoa, timber, seafood, you name it. The change for these supply chains really came about when the industry leaders such as yourself worked proactively on these issues and invested into building the future of the market. We recently conducted a needs assessment of hundreds of producers in Asia, and the majority of them, including producers that are still producing cage eggs, said that they needed more technical support, technical training in order to do this well. That's the number one concern that they have. In some markets, it can take up to 3 to 6 months for companies to start implementing their policies if there is already a stable supply. In other markets, it can take up to 3 years for producers to transition and to go through that learning curve. So what we have learned is that companies that invest a little bit now into building the capacity of their supplier will reap the benefits and be able to implement their policies a lot quicker, score better on benchmarks, and reduce the cost for many, many years to come, just like in the first case study that I shared. So very quickly, I'd like to touch on support that we have given to producers. In a roadmap that we developed for a particular client, we included technical training for the producer in China. And we supported this producer through virtual and on-farm technical training in cage-free management. Our technical experts helped them through the whole process, including setting up the rearing and laying facilities to optimizing the ongoing operations when the birds start to lay eggs. Before coming to us, they had tried to do it by themselves and they didn't get the results that they were hoping for. They had a relatively high percentage of floor eggs. And these are some of the factors that can drive up production costs because the yield becomes lower. And within 1 year of working with us, the producer is now one of the most successful cage-free producers in China. The production rate has increased to more than 95%, which means that the hens are producing a lot of eggs, as many as those that are housed in battery cages. These are among the best statistics in the egg industry, not just for cage-free, but in the egg industry. At the same time, we have helped them drastically reduce the amount of floor eggs to less than 5%. And this is an ongoing thing. We're still working with them on this. Throughout this process, we have helped this producer optimize egg production. And for the client, it also means that they now have a stable and affordable supply of cage-free eggs. They're able to report meaningful progress to stakeholders. So which part of the implementation journey are you at? Have you tried getting quotes from suppliers? Have you started implementing, or are you waiting for prices to become lower? Or do you already have a plan to afford the price increase that you expect? Or do you want to take action to optimize the price gap? So just to summarize what I've shared today, we have shared with you some common misconceptions and case studies on implementation roadmaps that basically said that the cost of cage-free eggs can be optimized. The cost of producing cage-free eggs can be optimized. And this indirectly then directly translates to cost savings for food and hospitality companies. Developing roadmaps will save you time and help you implement your policy quickly. And companies that take action now will see long-term impact, also long-term savings. If any of what I shared today has been useful or it sounds good to you and you would like more support, please scan the QR code and share your contact details with us via this link that my colleague will share right now in the chat box, and we'll get in touch with you. we'll love to offer you some complimentary consultation to help you take action towards implementing your cage-free policy successfully and avoid these common mistakes. I'd love to hear now from all of you, what's your main takeaway from this session and whether you have any questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box and we will try to address them within the time that we have today. Was there anything that resonated with you?
I see a couple of hands raised. So you can either write it in the chat box or I can unmute if anyone wants to share the takeaways. So I see Manjuna, I'll unmute you.
So Manjuna, are you able to unmute yourself and speak? If not, I'm happy to read the question.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my question is like how willing are open these buyers, ready to give a long-term commitments. That is one of the key factor here for us because the initial investment is huge for a producer. Can you hear me, Dawn?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for your question. Your question is how willing are buyers?
Yeah, because it's like a chicken and egg story because when the initial investment is high, for the investors to invest, they need commitments. So commitment POs, commitment buyers and all of that. So for that, these people are not ready. So that kind of stops a producer from investing initially because unless you invest on a large scale, obviously the cost is not going to come down. So as a producer, we are ready to do that, but it comes, we need the commitment.
Exactly. That's what I hear often from producers. And I think in the case study that I shared, that is exactly how we have helped both the producer and the client transition because there was a long-term commitment and also technical support that enabled this producer to provide solutions and solve the client's problems. So when we work with companies, we also want to be able to support them in this journey with a long-term vision. And companies also are looking for suppliers that can give them a stable supply at an affordable price.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Manjuna. There's another question here on what kind of certifications should we be looking out for? Certification schemes, there are different certification schemes around the world, and each of them have different standards. And it differs from market to market. And we'll love to have a chat with you about which market you're referring to, and we can give more specific advice based on your questions.
I have a few more questions here, Dawn, that came in to me. So one is about the level we work on. So what level do you work on a roadmap? Can we do it by property or do we need to do it by region or by country?
So when we work on a roadmap with companies, we really want to identify the priority countries that they want to work on. It can be for a country. It can also be for a region. For example, with one company, and we have done both. We have done roadmaps for across Asia and like 8 countries, and we have also done roadmaps for just one country, for the focal country for that company, and then move on to the second country with the same client and third country and so on and so forth. So very flexible depending on what you need.
Okay, another question. We see that in other countries and regions like Europe and Latin America, companies can just buy cage-free eggs. Why is Asia so different?
Europe started transitioning to cage-free eggs when there was a ban on battery cages, and they have been doing this for 20 years. So this is definitely not a new topic. It's a mature market. There's lots of suppliers available. The producers most of them have gone through a learning curve in some countries. Of course, when you talk about Eastern Europe, it's a different situation. Therefore, there's already a supply of cage-free eggs, and the price difference is not huge. It's relatively easy in those markets. In Asia, it's a different story. This topic is new. Producers are learning. Some of them are still thinking about it because they're not sure whether if they transition, they get a market. They have a commitment from a buyer because there's initial investment involved, just like what Manjuna shared earlier. So we really need localized solutions for each market. That's a good question here from another participant. Which are the most mature countries in Asia in terms of volumes of cage-free and consumers' appetite and regulation? This is a very good question and also a very big question, 3 parts to it. So I'll try to answer all of them. The most mature markets in Asia would be, for example, in South Korea, in Thailand, where there's already big producers transitioning to cage-free eggs, and there is a supply. However, what we hear is that there's still a price gap, a significant price gap between cage and cage-free. And in many cases, this is like 2 to 3 times higher. And some companies just find it not affordable, especially with the volumes that they need to buy. So even in mature markets, we're seeing companies having difficulty transitioning and needing more solutions and needing the need to optimize cost. In terms of consumer appetite, we work with retailers and we see that there is an increasing trend for retailers to introduce their own private brand of cage-free eggs. We see that in Japan, we see that in Hong Kong, Singapore, Indonesia most recently. And also that there's more and more shelf space dedicated to cage-free. And I think a good example would be Singapore. 6 years ago, there used to be 1 brand of cage-free on the market. Now there's more than 10. And it has grown organically without any advocacy, without any campaigns, with no NGOs driving the change here, messaging to consumers. In Hong Kong, we also see a lot of that in Thailand as well. And especially with younger consumers, many of them are exposed to media online and they get messaging on these topics from social media as well as the news. And they're curious and they start researching and they become more interested in these products. And as well as some companies that have commitments have started messaging the consumers about the benefits and why they're making commitments as well. So slowly we do see consumer awareness increasing in this region. The third part of your question is regulation. In terms of regulation, we have seen in just the past 2 years, we have seen governments in Thailand, in Philippines, in China. China was not government policy, but there was a policy introducing new standards and new regulation, labeling regulation on cage-free eggs. And other governments are also working on it, even though it's not public yet. So definitely this is an issue that has gotten the attention of governments in this particular region.
Thanks, Dawn. There's a question here. Can you explain the difference between cage-free and free range, like you mentioned during your presentation?
Sure. So cage-free, actually without a set of good standards to guide it, it just means without cages. So free range, in many countries, they define it as a subset of cage-free. So free range eggs are caged without cages, without cages, but with free range eggs, the animals get access to an outdoors area. They can go out if they want to for a certain time during the day. With cage-free, we tend to see that it means indoor system. But free range is also a cage-free system. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, another question is about what's an effective method to visit farmers and to engage with farmers to transition to cage-free?
Right. Good question. But before that, I just want to jump back to the free range topic, because I just thought of an example where it may be relevant to you. So when we work with some clients, some of their staff or their suppliers don't understand what cage-free is, and they think that it's free range. So when they get quotations for free range eggs, it costs a lot more than what cage-free costs, and that misunderstanding, that lack of training, translates to higher costs for a lot of companies. So now back to this question about how effective. Your question again, Elisa?
The question is, what is an effective method for visiting farmers and engaging with the farmers to transition to cage-free?
So we have a network. We have contacts with a lot of producers through our work over the years. And we also are in contact with producers that are still using cages, but they're interested to transition to cage-free. And an effective method to engage with producers is always, I think, showing them that there is a market for cage-free, that the company or buyer is interested and willing to give them a contract that their eggs can be successfully sold. And so with that kind of conversation, it's always more productive when we talk to producers.
Okay. Here's a question about certification. If a farm has implemented cage-free practices or standards, does it still need to be certified? And will certification mean an additional cost? And will that impact the selling price of the cage-free eggs?
So certification is a really relevant topic as well. It depends on the certification that particular in particular countries, because in some countries there are certifications that can be more affordable. In some countries that no certification scheme actively operates there, and producers have to, if they want to go for a foreign scheme, they have to pay for the travel cost and certification fees, and that adds up to the cost. But definitely certification is one of those things that companies always ask for, and it benefits the producers as well as companies. We are actually working on a benchmark for standards and certifications available in the world, and it'll be ready very soon, and we'll be happy to share that with you later on when it's ready. Elisa, do you want to add to this?
Sure. Regarding the benchmark, as Don mentioned, we're creating a benchmark for producers that covers a number of topics on welfare practices and management practices with different levels for farmers. And we do understand that certification isn't always possible. So we'll be releasing this benchmark soon. It's been going through a couple of rounds of stakeholder consultation and feedback. And this is to really help producers reach a good standard and benchmark of animal welfare, and to have a level playing field for the various producers, and for companies to also be able to know that the eggs that they're procuring are coming from farms that have good practices. And the benchmark can also be used for food businesses as well, as part of their procurement standards for cage-free eggs. So Don, that actually covers, there was another question on how we benchmark the cage-free egg standard that could apply in Asian countries. So I think we covered that now. We have another question. Based on your knowledge, do you think that Asian producers will be able to supply sufficient cage-free eggs by 2026?
So this is a very important question, and it's something that we actively work on. We definitely want to see the industry succeed and successfully implement the policies. And we find that companies that are more proactive in engaging on this particular topic and building the capacity of their supplier will be able to transition successfully. And the volume of demand that the total volume of cage-free eggs required is quite substantial. We actually need a lot of companies, to work together on this issue with us to help to produce this transition. In many markets, we don't see a lack of willingness from producers. Producers are willing. So I would say that I'm quite optimistic that it is possible, but we also need everybody to work together to help that materialize. And one way is to work with us to develop a roadmap and engage actively with the producer to optimize the cost, to make it possible for companies to implement the policy and to technically support the producers as they go cage-free to solve the challenges that we've been facing.
Thanks, Dawn. We have another question here. So when will we be building a model farm in India? I think that's also referencing our model farm that we're developing in our training centers in Indonesia and China. So when will we be doing this in India?
I'll pass this question over to Jayasima, my colleague.
Yeah, we're really excited about India, and even though India is not a direct country in which Global Food Partners focuses on, India is seeing a movement both legislatively as well as corporate-wise for cage-free transition. What's really exciting is that there is a Cage-Free Producers Association being established in India, and we are really excited. And I think we're excited to look at ways on how to develop a model farm and build capacity of farmers in India as well. And just for the broader audience, Global Food.
You're muted, Jaya.
Sorry, just in the broader thing, I think just for the broader audience, Global Food Partners in association with Aries University based out of Netherlands and University of Gajah Mada in Indonesia is building a model farm in Indonesia, which will help farmers train on cage-free. We're looking at setting up a similar farm in China, where we are going to build a model farm and a training center there. And it's a great opportunity, I think, especially from a buyer's point of view, to as a storytelling narrative, to sponsor farmers to go in and learn how to successfully transition to cage-free. We also have online courses that are available on academy.globalfoodpartners.com. Definitely, India is on the cards, and as Global Food Partners, we're committed to building capacity of producers to successfully transition to cage-free.
That's right. We can also share with you during a follow-up some of the virtual resources that we have developed for farmers as well as corporates, courses, and information about our model farms and training programs.
Thanks, Dawn. We have another question. There are some perceptions and concerns on cage-free production due to food hygiene and animal disease like bird flu in some markets. What is your take on this?
This is a question that we often get asked. Bird flu is not going to just magically disappear. It is a challenge, but I would say just by going cage-free, it will not automatically increase your risk for contracting bird flu, or the farm will not automatically be more susceptible to bird flu. There are many issues involved, and if the farmer knows how to manage biosecurity and have good practices on farm to protect the birds, this is not something that would be a huge challenge. Because in most cases, cage-free is an indoor system. They don't contact wild birds from outside. And in terms of disease management and other challenges that they face, like hygiene, this is a topic that we cover in our training courses as well. These are challenges that can be managed if the farmer knows how to do it. and we are ready to support them with the experience that we have through working with other producers.
Okay. I'm seeing two hands that are up. I'm not sure if we already addressed your questions. If not, feel free to unmute yourself or feel free to ask your question again in the Q&A. All right, Kevin, I see your hand up. Do you want to ask your question? Let me unmute you. All right, are you able to unmute yourself and ask?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Kevin.
Hello, my question is how to claim the benefit of to consumers about the cage-free concept, because there's a lack of understanding about cage-free in China.
Good question, Kevin. And we have helped companies develop marketing plans and strategies to communicate their commitment to consumers. And there are many, many different ways to do that, either through menus or through messaging, training our staff so that when they serve customers, they educate them as well, or including some kind of messaging materials that are customer facing, or even social media campaigns. We have seen companies do all of these as well, and we have helped companies develop different strategies. So whether you're a hospitality company or a retailer, there are different approaches to bring the message across to consumers to communicate the values that the policy has. Does that answer your question?
All right. Oh. Okay. I believe those are all of the questions that have come in. I don't see any more in the Q&A. All right, so we can wrap up.
One more hand up, please, I think Ashok.
Okay. Ashok, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I hope so. You have to tell me.
We can hear you, Ashok.
Yeah. My question is that whether Global Food Partners and you guys have any specific data on Indian cage-free market scenario, and followed by another question that's very simply: are the buyers of cage-free, are the people who have commitments to cage-free eggs, have a inclination towards entering in a long-term contract with producers?
Jasima, would you like to answer that? Jasima Nugahali is our Chief Program Officer, if we missed out on introducing him just now.
Thanks, ma'am. Thanks. I think India is very, very interesting overall as a country. I think we're seeing some sort of a growth in cage-free, and overall, it's still that the corporate buyers form a small part of the entire supply chain. However, there is seen an increase in retail demand for cage-free eggs as well. So broadly, it does seem that India would fall like in many of other countries as well, right? As in the sense that there are companies who made these cage-free commitments, but then they don't necessarily control or have a huge share in the markets, and the market are not necessarily changing on their own. And I think to that answer, what we suggest in our roadmaps for India, like for many other places, is that companies need to be giving long-term commitments of at least 2 to 3 years to buy, because that's going to motivate the farmer to set up. I guess the broad sense has been that for cage-free to be economically viable, you got to get that volume, because the unit economics has to work out. And when you have really, really small farmers, while they are able to cater to a very niche consumer base who's looking for either organics, free range, or eggs from native hens, that doesn't necessarily give the volumes that's needed for large scale consumption. And I guess for the large scale consumption, what we really need is a modern cage-free systems in which can house similar number of birds and also give the same sort of productivity. For example, the issue with using, let's say, a native breed, which I think is a pretty common one that's used in many cage-free farms in India, is that at their peak production, they can still only produce maybe about 180 to 200 eggs per year. So now that, in comparison to a commercial breed, automatically makes the price of the eggs more. So there's nothing you can do to increase the production there, right? So in that sense, to us, it seems that what's really required in India is a partnership between a buyer and seller. So for buyers who are on this group, if you really are looking for procuring in India, what Global Food Partners can do is help link up with producers who are willing to transition or expand their operations to cage-free, because there is really no retail market for cage-free eggs. So in case of excess production, there is really no place to sell these eggs. And there are times when there's a huge amount of excess production. And when you really put yourself in the producer's shoes, you realize that if there's an excess production, there's really no other place to sell these eggs. And then you just sell them in the market rate as caged eggs. And that causes a huge amount of loss. So it's very, very important that we work very closely with the buyers and the sellers to provide that kind of long-term commitment. And I guess none of this is unique to India as well, right? As in any sort of emerging market where there isn't a retail demand for a particular product, when there is an excess, the producer is always fearful of excess production and what happens to excess production. So just having that sort of partnership between the buyers and sellers is probably the cornerstone of helping implement these cage-free commitments. Don, there's a question for you. In Singapore, we use liquid eggs widely, but there isn't liquid egg supply using cage-free eggs now. Solution.
That's true. In many Asian markets, we see that there are companies looking for liquid eggs, but there just isn't any supply, and it's expensive to import from other regions. And that's why with some of our clients, we engage with a processor that can connect to a cage-free egg producer to create that supply for our clients. And that's something we can also help you with if you let us know, besides Singapore, which other markets you face challenges in, and that's something we can help with.
Don, I think we have time for one more question. We have a question here about positive activities, strategies or campaigns to educate customers about cage-free eggs, to increase awareness about the benefits of cage-free eggs, and for long-term, the answer, the question disappeared, and about long-term strategies to create and increase market demand for cage-free eggs.
To talk to consumers about increasing the demand for cage-free eggs.
To educate customers about cage-free eggs and increase awareness about the benefits.
We can definitely partner with companies to do some of that work, because, you know, when you have such a policy, it's something really, really nice to communicate to your end consumers and to educate them and to make them see the value of what they're paying for. Like sometimes if they're paying, 50 cents more or $1 more, if they see value in something, they will pay for it. And the trick is really like in how to communicate to them so that they can see the value of it. And I realized that when people see the value of something, it's like $1 or 50 cents is not too much to afford, but really in terms of campaigning to consumers, that's not what we do, because we're a consultancy, so we don't like campaign to consumers. But what we find really effective is that when we partner with brands and we make that message really positive and help brands really showcase their commitment, and consumers get educated in the process. And nowadays it's very trendy as well for consumers to hear the farm to table story. Like if you partner with a particular farm or particular producers are curious about the food that they consume and where it's from. And with many businesses, it's possible to tell those stories and put yourself in a good light.
Thanks, Don. I think those are all the questions. Thank you everyone for participating, for all of your questions and comments. We're nearing the hour, so we can wrap up. Yeah, thank you again to everyone for joining, and Dawn for sharing all of your experiences and your case studies. Yeah, as you can see, this is something we really love working on these plans for companies, and just creating something that will work. We know that many of you have spent a lot of time, like Dawn mentioned, contacting producers on lists and with strategies that have led to frustration and not always leading to the results that you hope to see. So do reach out to us if we can help you with your roadmap, with your implementation plan, so that we can help you reach your goals, whether it's by 2025 or whatever your cage-free egg deadline is, and so that we can help you reduce the costs so that cage-free eggs will fit into your budget. Dawn will share her email address in the chat. Feel free to reach out to her at any time with questions. I'm also going to reshare the link that we shared before, where it asks for a few pieces of information if you are interested in some support with your roadmap. So I'm sharing that in the chat as well. And again, thank you to everyone. We hope you have a really good rest of your morning, rest of your day, and we hope to speak with you soon.
Thank you, everybody.